When my newborn son was rushed to the NICU just hours after birth, I was drowning in fear, helplessness, and silence. Every beep of a machine made my heart stop, but nothing was more chilling than the moment a nurse brushed off his cries with, "A cold, he just needs to cry it out." Her words haunted me. Something about the way she said it didn't feel right. So I did something desperate. Something I never thought I'd do. I installed a hidden camera inside the NICU. I told myself it was just to give me peace of mind. But what I saw, it changed everything. This is the story of what really happens behind the closed doors of a place we're taught to trust blindly, and how one mother's instincts uncovered a truth no one wanted to believe, wasn't supposed to be alone. That night, after 36 hours of labor and an emergency C-section, I expected to hold my baby and fall asleep with him in my arms. Instead, they took him. They said his breathing was irregular, his color off. NICU, just to be safe. It was protocol, they said. I watched the doors close behind the nurse who wheeled him away. I didn't even get to say goodbye. The silence in the room after that was unbearable. I kept thinking I'd hear a cry from the hallway, some sign that he was okay. But nothing came. Just the rhythmic beeping of machines, and the buzz of fluorescent lights overhead. By morning, they told me he was stable. But they wouldn't let me in right away. "He needs rest," they said. "The staff is doing everything possible." I didn't argue. I wanted to trust them. I wanted to believe that hospitals are sacred places. But that changed the second I finally stepped into the NICU. There were 6 tiny bassinets, glowing under overhead heat lamps, all surrounded by wires and monitors. My son was in the corner, wrapped in a blanket too big for his body. He looked so small, so helpless. And he was crying. No, not just crying, wailing. The kind of sound that makes your stomach clench and your chest tighten. I moved toward him, instinctively, but a nurse stepped in front of me. "He just needs to cry it out," she said, without looking up from her clipboard. I froze. "Excuse me?" "He's fine. If we go to him every time he cries, he'll never learn to self-soothe. New moms are always anxious, but trust me, we know what we're doing." Her tone was final, clinical. Like she was reciting a line she'd used 100 times before. But I couldn't unsee it, the way his little fists trembled, the way his eyes seemed to dart around, as if searching for someone who wouldn't come. Over the next few days, I tried to tell myself I was overreacting. That she was probably right. But then it happened again. Every time he cried, no one came. I started timing it. 10 minutes. 15. Once, it was over 20 minutes before anyone even glanced at him. I started noticing other things too. The nurses laughing in the hallway while alarms beeped inside. One of them scrolling on her phone beside a baby whose oxygen levels were dipping. I wasn't supposed to notice. But I did. When I brought it up to the pediatrician, he smiled and nodded like I was just another hormonal mother. "It's hard," he said. "But they're in good hands." Good hands. That phrase stuck with me. Because if these were good hands, why did my gut twist every time I left the NICU? So I made a decision, ordered a tiny camera, one that looked like a portable charger. It arrived the next day, and I charged it overnight. I wasn't sure if I'd actually go through with it. I knew it was a violation of trust, maybe even illegal. But I needed to see. I needed to know. The next morning, I waited until one of the nurses was busy restocking cabinets. I placed the camera behind a row of formula containers on the shelf, above my son's bassinet. It had a wide angle. I'd be able to see everything. That night, back in my hospital room, I opened the footage on my phone. I told myself I'd just skim through it. Just check for reassurance, but within 5 minutes, I saw something that made my blood run cold, and that was only the beginning. IT started out normal. For the first 10 minutes, nothing unusual happened. A nurse came by to check vitals. She didn't speak to him. Didn't even touch him, just read the monitors, scribbled something on a clipboard, and walked away. My son was awake the whole time, his little arms twitching beneath the swaddled eye. Kept watching. Another nurse came in. Not the one from before. This one looked younger, more alert. She stood beside his bassinet for a while, looking down at him. My breath caught when she reached out to stroke his forehead. He relaxed under her touch, the way newborns do when they recognize something gentle. But then, she looked over her shoulder, paused, and walked away. That moment hurt in a way I wasn't prepared for. She knew he needed something. She felt it. And still, she walked away, but it wasn't until the 23-minute mark that I saw her, the same nurse who'd told me to let him cry it out. She entered the room with a cup of coffee in her hand. No gloves. No chart. She wasn't there to check anything. She was talking to someone in the hallway, loud, laughing, and my son was crying again. It was a desperate, raw kind of cry, like his throat couldn't keep up with his panic, and then, she did something I will never forget. She rolled her eyes. Rolled her eyes at my son's cries, like he was an inconvenience. Like he was a chore, and then she said it, "Oh my God, shut up." She said it under her breath, but the camera picked up the audio clearly. I replayed it 3 times just to be sure. And every time, the bile in my throat climbed higher. I didn't sleep that night. I watched the entire footage, 6 hours of it, obsessively cataloging every interaction. I noted how many times he cried, how long it took for someone to respond, how often the staff laughed just outside the room, never looking in. I wrote it all down. Times. Faces. Words, but there was one moment that stopped me cold. At 3:12 a.m., the room was empty. No staff, no movement. My son was sleeping, finally. But then, in the corner of the frame, I saw a figure. A man. He wasn't in scrubs. He wasn't wearing a badge. Just a black hoodie with the hood up, hands in his pockets. He stepped into the room, looked around, and then leaned over the bassinet. I sat bolt upright in bed. He didn't touch my son. Not exactly. He just stared. For a long time. At least 30 seconds. Then he pulled something out of his pocket, I couldn't see what, and tucked it underneath the blanket, and then he left, just like that. I paused the footage and stared at the screen, my heart racing so fast I thought I might pass out. Who was he? What did he leave? Why hadn't anyone noticed? I wanted to scream. To run down the hall and tear that place apart. But instead, I got dressed. I made sure no one saw me leave my room, and I walked back to the NICU as calmly as I could. The nurse at the desk looked up. "Can I help you?" "I want to see my son." She hesitated. "Visiting hours, I'm not asking." I said it. With a voice I didn't recognize. She blinked, then handed me a gown and let me through. My hands were shaking as I pulled back the blanket. At first, I didn't see anything. Just his tiny chest rising and falling. But then, near his hip, I felt something hard beneath the fabric. It was a folded piece of paper. I looked around to make sure no one was watching. Then I unfolded it. One word. Run. I stood there in the dim NICU light, holding the note in my hand. The word burned into my mind. Run, that was all it said. No name, no explanation. Just a single command, handwritten in shaky ink, tucked beside my newborn son. It felt like a warning. Or maybe a threat. Either way, my fingers went cold. I looked around again, trying to keep my breathing steady. The nurse who had let me in was distracted with paperwork. The others were somewhere in the hallway, their voices faint. No one had seen me find the note. I slipped it into my robe pocket and took a deep breath. My son was asleep now, peaceful for the first time in hours. Whatever that man had done or left, he hadn't harmed him. But that only made it worse. Because it meant he could have. I barely slept that night. I kept the footage open on a loop, trying to catch more of the man's face, but the shadows were too thick. The hood covered everything. He moved like someone who'd been there before. Comfortable, almost invisible. I replayed the moment he leaned over the crib. There was something intimate about it. Like he wasn't just a stranger. Like he knew my son. The hospital had security cameras, obviously, but when I asked the next day if I could speak with someone about reviewing visitor logs, the receptionist gave me a look like I'd asked for nuclear codes. Only authorized personnel are allowed in the NICU, she said. There are no unauthorized visitors. But I saw someone. On video. Last night. That's not possible, she replied. Flatly, her eyes didn't flinch. She didn't even ask for more details. Just repeated herself and offered to have someone from administration call me later. I nodded, pretending to accept that answer, but I knew then that I was alone in this, so I started asking questions, subtle ones. I chatted with other parents in the waiting area, nurses on shift changes. I kept my voice casual, my tone light. Had anyone seen anything strange? Any complaints? Anyone fired recently? Most people brushed me off. But one nurse, a quiet woman with tired eyes and a trembling hand, hesitated when I mentioned the man in the hoodie. I noticed the flicker in her expression. You've seen him, I said. She looked down at the floor. I shouldn't talk about it. Please. My son is in that room. She swallowed hard. Her voice barely a whisper. There were rumors. A few months ago, a baby went into respiratory failure without warning. The monitors glitched, and the staff didn't catch it in time. Parents were told it was a congenital issue. But someone said the monitors weren't malfunctioning. They were turned off. I stared at her. By who? She shook her head. No one knows. Or no one wants to know. A nurse said she saw a man walking into the unit late at night, same description. Black hoodie, no badge. When she reported it, she was moved to another department the next day. No explanation. My mouth went dry. Do the parents know? She met my eyes, and I'll never forget what she said next. They think their baby died in his sleep. That night, I watched the next 6 hours of footage. I didn't eat. I didn't move. I just stared at the screen, waiting for something. Anything. At 2:41 a.m., he came back, the same hoodie. Same slow movements. This time, he wasn't alone. He held something in his hand, a syringe. I slammed my laptop shut and ran, didn't even know where I was running. My bare feet slapped against the cold hospital floor as I tried to breathe, tried to think, tried not to collapse under the weight of what I'd just seen. A man. A syringe. Standing over my son's crib. Like it was nothing, I barged into the NICU without knocking. One of the nurses turned, startled, but I didn't care. My eyes were locked on the bassinet. My baby was still there. Breathing. Sleeping. Alive. Ma'am, you can't. He was here, I said. There was a man in here last night with a syringe. He was standing over my son. I have it on video. That stopped them cold. A second nurse looked up. A third stepped back from the monitors. For a moment, I thought they might actually react with the urgency I needed. But then something shifted in the air. The nurse closest to me smiled. Ma'am, she said calmly, like I was a child mid-tantrum. I think you're overtired. You're under a lot of stress. I'm not hallucinating. I have footage. Then let's go talk to security, she said. We'll get this all sorted out. I followed her down the corridor, gripping my phone like it was the only weapon I had. But as we walked, I noticed something strange. We weren't going toward the front desk. We weren't going to security. We were heading to a door marked staff only. My stomach dropped. Where are we going? This way, she said without turning. I stopped walking. No. I want a hospital administrator. Right now. And I want a police officer. She turned, slowly, and something in her face shifted. That smile faded. What was left behind wasn't neutral, it was cold. Controlled. You should be careful with accusations like that, she said. Hospitals have protocols. We can't have parents sneaking in with cameras, spreading panic. You're trying to protect someone. I'm trying to protect everyone, she said. Including you. I backed away. I didn't even try to argue. I turned and walked, fast but not running, back to my room. As soon as I was inside, I locked the door, pulled the blinds, and texted my husband. I told him everything. Every terrifying second. Every suspicious look. Every cry I'd ignored, every shift change I'd watched. I sent him the video clips, the note, the photo of the man in the hoodie. And then I packed. When he arrived 20 minutes later, I was waiting with our son in my arms, already discharged against medical advice. I didn't care about paperwork. I didn't care about threats. We were leaving, but before we made it to the elevator, a security guard stepped in front of us. Hospital policy, he said. We need to speak with you before you leave. My husband raised his phone. We're already on the phone with the police. That changed everything. The guard blinked, looked at the phone, then stepped aside without another word. We didn't wait for an invitation. We pushed through the doors and out into the night, spent the next 48 hours in a hotel. My son finally slept without screaming. I held him every second. My husband contacted lawyers. And I reviewed the footage again, every angle, every face. That's when I noticed it. The man in the hoodie wasn't just anyone, he was wearing a hospital ID badge, turned backward, but visible in the reflection of a metal cart, and when I zoomed in on the frame, I recognized the name. Dr. Carson. MYOB, the same man who delivered my son. I wanted to be wrong. I wanted to believe that my sleep-deprived mind had made a mistake, that the reflection was distorted, that I was seeing something that wasn't there. But the name was clear. Carson. And the face, though obscured by the hoodie, matched the bone structure, the walk, the posture I'd seen every appointment for 9 months. Dr. Carson had been kind. Empathetic. The kind of doctor that remembered your birthday and asked about your family. He was the reason I chose that hospital. I trusted him in the most vulnerable moment of my life. I trusted him to bring my son into the world, and now I had video of him leaning over my baby's crib in the middle of the night, holding a syringe. I sent everything to the police. They said they would open an investigation, but their tone was cautious. Formal. Like they were already preparing to tell me nothing would come of it. Hospitals protect their own, and doctors like Carson didn't just lose their licenses overnight, but I had something better than their approval, had the truth, and I had proof. So I did what any mother who had nothing left to lose would do. I uploaded the footage. The whole story. I posted it anonymously, time-stamped, subtitled, every detail laid bare. Not edited for drama. Not sensationalized. Just facts. Real. Raw. Undeniable. And then I watched it spread. The internet did what the system refused to do. Within 48 hours, the video had millions of views. Parents from around the country, even around the world, started sharing similar stories. Tiny moments they'd brushed off. Whispers in hallways. NICU nightmares they'd never been able to prove. Someone else messaged me directly. She'd worked in the same hospital. Had been fired 2 years ago after raising concerns about missing medication logs. She said Dr. Carson had access to controlled substances not listed in patient charts. And when she questioned it, her contract was suddenly terminated. That's when I stopped sleeping, because this wasn't just about me. My son had almost been part of something much, much darker. A week later, Dr. Carson resigned. The hospital called it a personal leave of absence. No charges. No arrest. Just silence, but people were watching now. And not just online, reporters camped outside the hospital. Protesters with signs demanding answers. Parents who'd been ignored for too long, suddenly loud and unified. And inside my inbox, dozens of messages, some from whistleblowers, others from terrified parents, kept piling up. The system might be slow, but the truth had already escaped. Still, I couldn't stop wondering, what was he trying to do that night to the syringe? The note. The warning to run. It didn't add up. If Dr. Carson was the danger, then who warned me? I rewatched the footage again, this time focusing on the frame right before the man approached the crib. Something about the way he moved. The way he glanced around, hesitated, then reached into his pocket. It wasn't calculated. It was conflicted, and that's when I realized it wasn't Dr. Carson. The man in the hoodie was someone else. The badge belonged to Carson, but the man wearing it wasn't him. He'd stolen it. Whoever he was, he'd snuck in with a stolen badge. He'd left a warning. He'd planted a syringe to be found. To scare me. To expose someone. It wasn't an attack. It was a message. The real question now wasn't whether my son had been in danger. It was who else still was, and how many people were willing to stay quiet.